With these two amazing women who are part of my project's goal, which is to ensure that by 2050, 50% of all political and policy leadership positions are held by women. And we look forward today to having a quick discussion of how we're making progress globally, how we can get there, and how we can encourage women to enter public, civil, and political service. President Sirleaf Johnson, I'd like to start with you. From where you sit, are we making progress globally in terms of women's political and policy participation and leadership?
Tremendous progress. If you look around the world today, you see how many women are vying for leadership at all levels in society. In Africa, for example, we've now seen so many women, prime ministers, ministers, members of parliament, one or two countries, Rwanda being an example, the largest number of parliamentarians are women worldwide, not just Africa. And so tremendous progress, but yet one has to also recognize that even though there's progress, there's a whole lot more ways that we've got to go to get the 50% representation that's equivalent to our numbers in the world. So I think, yeah, progress is there. We need to recognize it, but we need to do more.
Dr. Banda, what do you think, and what is holding back the progress, or what are the impediments?
I'm glad that Madam Sirleaf talked about the positive side and also said, but there's a long way to go. Let me focus on the long way to go. I believe that by now everybody knows that women's leadership is under attack. You just have to look at what's going on, what happened in Australia, Thailand, Myanmar, Philippines, Zimbabwe, Argentina, Brazil, and the United States of America. Each case has to be looked differently and separately, but the general view that I have is that women are getting into leadership, and we need to find ways of supporting and helping them to stay in those positions. Because otherwise, we find that we're making progress, women get into leadership, and then they leave. Sometimes we are even being told that they have investigated, they have found no corruption, but still this leader has to be impeached. So we need to be careful to make sure that the gains that we have made in the last 20 years, we don't lose. And I think the world must also make sure that when our presidents have been in leadership and they leave, they have to be protected.
So you both talked about we're making progress, but progress still needs to be made. You talked a bit about when women leave, they need to be protected. What advice, and President Sirleaf Johnson, let's start with you, would you want to give to African nations, to governments? What one thing can the governments do to increase women's political participation and leadership?
Since most leaders, most presidents are men, you need to liberate them. Get them to see the value. And it's happened in some places. Again, I have to point to Rwanda as an example, where women have been fully recognized for what they are, have been given equal opportunity, equal justice. But women too have to continue to articulate their cause, continue to argue for their rights, continue to be a part of the fight for equal rights. We have to, in Africa, we have to, for example, ensure that young girls are given the opportunity to reach their potential by making sure that they go to school and they're allowed the right to earn their future and to be what they want to be. So we're coming there, you know, and we just have to keep doing the things we're doing, keep making ourselves heard, keep finding our voices, keep vying for leadership at all levels.
Dr. Banda, can you talk a bit about that? We've talked about girls being born leaders, as you say, finding their voice, and the role of men. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
You want me to talk about Africa?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, maybe, but also to add on what President Sirleaf said, we've already got instruments in place that our governments on the continent of Africa have signed to say they will meet this quota. So what governments need to do now, what we need to see is the political will to fulfill that. For example, in the SADC region, it was agreed that in 1997 that 30% of all positions shall be filled by women. And that is not happening. So there are ways of increasing the number of women. We can have affirmative action. We can change the laws to do what Uganda has done, that one constituency per district, only women stand. But different ways, constitutions can be changed to make sure that presidents have, parliament or presidents have the right to appoint special groups, women, disabled, and the youth. But secondly, we find that in Africa, the biggest challenge is financial capacity for the women to compete on equal ground with men. And countries like the experience of Malawi was that that's when the international community came in. The Norwegian government provided 100,000 to each woman candidate, regardless of what their party belonged to, what party they belonged to. And what happened at the end of the day is that we moved from 11 women to 27, and the next election to 45. And we know that, like in Malawi, I started the National Association of Business Women to provide finance to women running business. And we found 6 years later that 5 women from that organization ended up standing for office, and it ended up becoming cabinet ministers. So there's a stubborn link between financial capacity and standing for elections, and I think governments can ensure that women are given opportunity of training and opportunity for finances. Now, you asked me to talk about the situation of the girl child in Africa. And we have discussed, because right now I'm serving as a distinguished fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center. We have discussed that as far as I'm concerned, the supply side is being addressed. UNICEF and international organizations are trying to ensure that our girls go to school. There's school uniform, there's school feeding programs, there's school sanitation facilities there for them to stay in school. My concern is the period just before that. From the day the child is born and they say it's a girl. And then in a home where boys are preferred, it's from that day. Tradition demands that boys eat with their father and all the men. Women eat only women. And if women eat less and least, this girl child is being deprived of the nutrition that the boy child is getting. And then coupled with that, all other traditional beliefs and the customs that she has to go through because the family believes in them. My position is that by the time this girl child goes to school, she's already disadvantaged because the boy child has had all those privileges before they go to standard 1. So when they both go to school, it's not possible for them to claim that we are giving them equal opportunity. Unless and until we treat our boy child and girl child as equals at household level. And then they go for early childhood education. And they're starting on that equal footing. And we eradicate all harmful traditions that the girls are subjected to. Then we can hope that we are providing equal opportunity for boys and girls. And so many women have told me, no, that's not happening anymore. And so let me be very clear that I'm not talking about the 20% of the level of Madam Self and me. I'm talking about the lowest segment, where a lot of girls are, and who also deserve equal opportunity.
I want to come back to that. Before that, I want to go back. You talked about laws and quotas. You also talked about political will. So in terms of changing political will, why does women's political participation and gender equality in this sphere matter? Because that's part of changing political will. Why does it matter? President Johnson?
Women bring to leadership something I think is a little bit, if I may dare to say, superior to men.
I think the audience agrees with you.
No, it's true. You know, the ability to compromise, we hope, can diminish the many wars we face. The sensitivity that a mother brings to any situation. I think those are certain characters of women that excel those of men. And if you look around historically, maybe today we're having some problems here and there, but generally women leadership have been strong enough, but at the same time sensitive enough to be able to carry a nation through peace and through compromises and through all the development processes that are required. So if you ask me, I say just what I said before. I think a woman's superior. Sorry, man.
They do say women have more of the leadership qualities, or other people have said they are better at the leadership qualities.
I think so.
So continuing. Dr. Banda, can you tell me a bit about this ever-growing momentum? We've got 2 African women leaders on stage. Can we talk about global networking and how to ensure that you all and your counterparts across sectors, such as Gracia, Michelle, and Ngozi, how can you be at global tables, and what's the importance of networking?
We're waiting for President Sirleaf to retire, so next year, so she can lead that crusade, because it is very necessary for us as women across Africa to form a very strong network. The issues that I was raising earlier, those of you who are experts will say, well, but what she was talking about, how do we address that? For me, I think it's having strong women's networks, strong organizations, massive civic education, change of mindset. For that to happen, we need to have very strong women's organization across Africa that will then recruit male allies that will assist us to change mindset of families, parents, and their attitude towards girls' education. So for that to happen, we need to have a very strong network across Africa. And my belief is that when we have a strong network in Africa, and there are strong networks in India, in Asia, and so on, the leadership shall get together. I say this because in 1992, Graça Machel invited 40 of us from the SADC region to go to Mozambique. And she said, well, I invited you so we can strengthen civil society in our countries. Most of those 40 women that met in Mozambique in 1992 got to this level. So it works and it helps, but it needs leadership. So, well, Graça Machel is still young and strong, and President Sirleaf is still young and strong. We can form a very strong network. we can form those networks and make sure that we are working across our continents in order to address issues of women and children.
President Sirleaf, you have some thoughts on this?
You know, Joyce says she's waiting for me to retire so I can leave this great movement of trying to ensure that women network and come together and support each other. That's, my retirement is an example of women leadership. I'm voluntarily at the end of my term giving up, right? Not changing the Constitution or anything like that.
Exactly.
No, I do believe that, again, there's been a lot of progress with women, young women, for example. Some of them right in this room that already have started about forming associations, ensuring that they look at what have been the experiences, what have been the values, what have been the challenges and the progress made by women leadership, how they can determine the models that they see and how they can follow that and prepare themselves for leadership. Women leaders do have their own associations. You mentioned Grassa Michelle and the work she's done to bring women leadership together. I think we can do more for networking. I think we can do more for reaching out to each other and being able to look at our own example and experiences and see how those have been able to handle things better, have set better examples, can provide the means where others can learn from that. So meetings such as these and your institution that promote the kinds of meeting for bringing women together to talk about that are things that just embolden other women that may not be as active to become a part of this. And so, and let's face it, women carry the burden also of being women. At the same time, women are just as professional, just as technocratic as men, and they make mistakes too. But the fact that we recognize that we're not talking about equality, we're talking about everything you can do, I can do. Sometimes we think we can do a little bit more, that's all, but we could network more, I think. We could reach across more and help each other to make sure that we find the means of minimizing or removing those constraints that women face in leadership. You mentioned one of them, resources. The lack of resources is a constraint. Being able to go out there, sometimes knowing what you face with having to take care of the family and the home sometimes constrains women who would like to come forward to vie for leadership. And we're not talking about just the president's level, like she said. We're talking about being a leader at all levels of society, even from school, from the church, from civil society, from business. We want to see women up there, equal participation and just as strong a role as anyone else.
But I also believe that the advantage of having women in leadership at this level is that there's evidence that when we get into leadership, we appoint fellow women. And because the women are out there and it's not just window dressing, they are qualified, but they're not being given an opportunity. And I learned that from President Sirleaf. When she became president, she appointed many women into her cabinet. And when I went into office, the same week I traveled to Liberia to learn from President Sirleaf. The headlines that day was the day the first met the second. And when I went home, I was able to appoint the first Chief Justice in Malawi, a woman, head of civil service, the first Solicitor General in the country, a woman, 2 governors of the Reserve Bank, 8 district commissioners at local level, and 100 appointments. I say this because it's only when you get into leadership and you discover that there are so many qualified women. We have to work side by side with men without antagonizing them, but just making sure that they understand that women are there and they are qualified as well, and they deserve to occupy those positions.
So you've talked about the young women and motivating the young women. What advice can you give them about their path to leadership, their path to political leadership? What do they need to get into leadership positions? Dr. Banda.
Oh, me? Oh, okay.
With you this time.
Yeah, my simple advice is that I can only speak with authority if I'm talking to African women, because that's how I know, what I know. Women that want to stand for office, for elected office, first must be in touch with grassroots. I don't know about most countries, but in Africa, you are better off standing where your parents came from. So even if you are living in the capital, you go home. But if you want to become a leader, a member of parliament, and you're going to stand in that constituency, and you go at 45 years old and tell them you want to stand, you can't win. So it is a decision you make when you are much younger. I'm going to end up in public office, and I'm going to stand to become a member of parliament. Then be in touch with home. Get involved with what's going on at home. Participate in projects at home. If you can afford it, introduce small projects back home, so that by the time you make an announcement that I'm coming to stand for election, people know you. That's number one. Number two, when now you have decided you want to become a member of parliament and you want training, then make sure that you are getting training that is tailor-made for Africa. Because I am one person who got the type of wrong training. Because anybody can come from Asia, from Europe, to train us in good faith. But the training they are giving us is the extreme opposite of what I should do when I meet my chief in the village. Because if they tell me be assertive, look him straight in the eye, that's the best way of losing an election, where I come from. So in the end, what we did, learning from our mistakes, was to identify trainers on the ground and partnering with our sisters in the West and organizations in the West, building the capacity to provide the training, but identify trainers on the ground that will provide training that is suitable for African women.
President Sirleaf Johnson.
I think one has to first set their goals. You know, whatever you want to be, you have to be. You have to decide, I want to be this. And then prepare for the goal. Prepare your plans for that goal. The self-confidence, you need to have the self-confidence that you can achieve those goals and go after it. And then stay the course, because there are going to be obstacles, difficulties, but being able to stay the course as you move along whatever is your chosen path toward the achievement of that goal. I think being able to benefit from the experience of others, being able to look at the best practices, the pitfalls that many have faced, and being able to plan accordingly, to adjust your own plans for the goal, and be able to know that you can lose. An important part of winning is losing, because the losing prepares you to win. And so, you know, I lost 2 times before I won the presidency. So it's having that courage to stay the course even when you run into difficulties like that. So I think, and Joyce, you know, sometimes you set your goals. Sometimes you plan it, and sometimes circumstances sort of set you on the path. And so when I started on, when I made a speech at my as alumnus of my school in 1972, so you know I'm very young.
Starting young, so momentum, stick to your goals, have the training, build your network. I'm gonna ask you the last and the hard question, because you both mentioned either talking to the men, changing the mindsets, getting the men to accept, and it's not all men, this is not us versus them, right? But getting the men to accept or working together. Do you think this generation is working together in a different way than previous generations towards women's political participation and parity?
Men have come a long way. I mean, from the home where there's now participation in the home, not quite that much in Africa yet, but you know, all the way to moving up in society. At the professional level, I think women have stood up and have earned their way and earned their equality. So, well, what one needs to do is to keep men engaged, to keep them a part of the dialogue, to keep them a part of understanding why the world needs its 50% that's just as equal, you know, just as ready, just as professional, to also earn equal pay, to also vie for any position without somebody being able to find a means to bring them down because they happen to be a woman. To be able to earn the respect, because you can do what anybody else can do, after all. And so I think that's what we're now aiming at, and that's what men, where you want to go into a room and it's a meeting on women and there are mostly women there. How do we get men to be a part of that? I'm looking at the mix here, and it seems to be a gender balance.
I know that we're not doing too bad. I don't.
Not too bad, right? No, so but like I think that the world has changed, and you find now that people are judged not by their gender, but judged by their abilities, by their competence, by their courage. And that's what the world is looking for, when we can all be judged by what we are, what we do, what we stand for, then equality then prevails.
I would like to say that as far as Africa is concerned, we are not doing very badly. The country with the highest number of cabinet ministers and members of parliament in one country, that country is in Africa. And Africa has already had 3 presidents, because Mauritius just elected their prime minister the other day. So 2 days ago, somebody asked me, why should we not challenge men? Why should we be diplomatic? Why should we beg them and so on? President Sirleaf has used the right word, engage them, because we need them. Because I believe that they've gotten it right now. They know that we are there and we need to work together. And without antagonizing our men, work together with them, because at the end of the day, we win. So I believe that you should be listening to us in Africa, because we are doing something right to be at this position. Because we have even overtaken America.
Hard to close after that, but I would like to thank you both for talking to us about the momentum, about the best practices, about engagement, about networking, working together, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.